this next story intersects the fight for justice for Black lives, as well as the fight for peace in our communities, fellas. George Floyd's 4-year-old niece was shot. She was shot while in bed, and thankfully, she is recuperating after surgery. Now, this is not the first story that any of us have heard about our precious babies being shot, sometimes killed, while they are sleeping in bed because of violence in our various communities. And the tragedy of this particular story is that the compounded tragedy is that it struck our the niece, the 4-year-old niece of our brother George Floyd, who we know was murdered in the most vicious fashion by Derek Chauvin. David, if we have a clip, let's run the clip of what's happening with that story. All right, we'll get the clip. Oh, there it is. Audio. Okay, we have no audio on that, but that's fine. Brother Mac, this is one of those things that I'm thinking about my friend in Chicago, Jamal Green. He comes on the show, and he regularly asks the question, "What the hell is going on in Chicago?" This wasn't Chicago, but the reality of it is that, you know,
if I'm not mistaken, Ben, I think the niece lives in Houston, correct?
Houston. It's an epidemic around the country, brother Mac. What are your thoughts about this collision? Right, it's the absurdity of the collision where our brother was killed by police violence, and then his niece, thankfully she's alive and recuperating, but shot in bed. And we still don't know the source of the violence. But my mind is already speculating. I just want to get your thoughts on this.
You know, Ben, just like there was an uproar at these police killings of Black Lives Matter, there is no doubt that there needs to be an uproar within our individual communities against this type of nonsense. You know, when anybody would ride around and recklessly shoot into a home with the possibility of committing an atrocity similar to what has happened to this little angel. You know, words like snitch, I won't tell, you know, none of that shit matters to me no more. Because you lower than low, you're not worth that. And that type of behavior cannot be tolerated. Now, it's one thing for us to, you know, to focus on the behavior aspect of it. But again, it's another to not focus on trying to create some level of hope in our community, some intervention in our community that won't place in anybody's mind that this type of behavior is acceptable. You know, so you know, you just imagine, man, what happens when you have school systems that fail miserably. You can't get a high school degree.
That's
You
right.
tell me, what are you going to do to make an honest living in this
That's
country?
right. That's right.
You can't get a college degree. What are you going to do to make an honest living in this country? So when that educational system fails as miserably as the American education system is failing our children, and they are left with no hope, we're going to see the type of behavior that we're seeing in cities all across the country. And that's, you know, and being from Jackson, my mom and I have gotten to the point where it is just exhausting to talk about the number of lives that are being lost in Jackson, Mississippi.
Jackson's a rough town, man.
Right? Because these kids are coming out with no education, no aspiration, no sight into a future. And so they just act, you know, they behave in this reckless way. So, you know, it's one thing to look at the act itself and be disappointed and be horrified about it. But it's another thing when you go a little bit deeper and start looking at, you know, what type of person would do this? Well, a person that has no hope, no aspects of a future. And a lot of that begins, you know, you could say it begins at home, but then it is exasperated when you go into a system of education that is supposed to, you know, give you the tools so that you can go out there and make an honest living. And now we're dropping out of college. We're not even going to college, dropping out of high school, not doing well in school, not valuing that education. And now you're in a peril situation like this. But
you know, Brother Mac, and I'm thinking I've covered so many stories. People, there's a game that's a rhetorical game that's played by white folks, white conservatives particularly. Um, that whenever we fight for justice for black folks, they're always like, "What's going on in what about Chicago?" Um, we ask that question ourselves, and we don't need you to say nothing about it. We don't need there's no solution for the black community that's going to come from whiteness and white supremacy and all of these different systems that were set up to create the conditions that we now have to go into the communities. You're right, brother Mac. We now have the responsibility of going into the communities and saving our people from a system that was designed to destroy them from the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at these young brothers who are overwhelmingly the ones committing this particular type of violence in our communities, let's not get it twisted. We're not talking about the mysterious black on black crime, because I would tell you about white on white crime. I would tell you about Hispanic on Hispanic crime. I got all the receipts from the FBI. They're all about the same. Okay. But we're talking about the violence that does happen that ends up taking the lives of our babies in our tribes, in our communities. And it is a direct extension of what you said, Brother Mac. It's a direct extension of the fact that these kids have no hope. But in the midst of having no hope, you got all of the wealth of this empire flashing before their eyes on Instagram and on social media and on the Real Housewives of this and the glamorous of that and the money and the making it rain here. They got all of that flashing in front of them every single day, but they go home and live in a system that was designed to oppress them since before they were born.